was wondering because Susannah, like I met with a producer last week, and we talked about a project that she's come up with the story and she's come up with the outline, but she doesn't have time to do the actual writing. And I was wondering, it was just an awkward situation because at first she approached me as being a writing partner, and that wasn't my definition of a writing partner. I thought, oh, you really want me to do the actual writing, but you want to oversee the project and have control of and she really was a stickler about you have to follow this outline. And then I went into a little bit about my view of structure being character and that there's an organic process to it, and I think it kind of freaked her out. And I was just wondering, have you had writing assignments like that where someone's approached you with their idea and wanted you to really stick with it, and how you dealt with that?
I'd have a pretty tricky time with that. So no, I haven't ended up in that situation. Sounds tricky.
So when you get asked to write something like In Her Shoes, they go, do you want to do it? Go and do it. They don't.
Well, they generally say, do you want to do it? And you figure out that you do, and you sort of check in once.
Okay.
Before I tend to check in once and say, this is kind of the shape I think it's going to be. This is what I think I'll lose. This is what I think I'll maybe add. And sometimes it's just, you just tell them this is kind of how I see it now. And I've been really lucky to work with good people who understand that when you say this is how I see it now, it may not be what they get, in 3 or 4 months. And if I'm veering wildly from it, I usually make a call and say, that thing we were talking about that we all thought was such a good idea, not such a good idea, I'm doing this instead. Just so that everybody's in it together. But I would have a hard time working with someone who said, just execute this.
Mm-hmm.
But, jobs are good to have.
Yeah.
So
I was wondering if Robin and Winnie,
Is she going to pay you?
She said that right now it's on spec, but that could change in a couple of
No,
weeks.
then don't do it. Don't do it.
I think a lot of this has to do with, I'm looking back now and thinking of myself, in your shoes, and because I was in your shoes, and I think one of the things that I feel like I did right, I even hate that word, but that I did I was doing myself a favor. Was I tended to gravitate. I got involved with people that there was a good reason. Either I just really loved hanging out with these people and I just had to get involved with them, i.e. my comedy group, but I learned a lot from being in a comedy group and writing comedy and performing it for years. Or there was something about somebody that, either I loved the idea so much, or I loved that person, or I thought that person was smarter than me, or there's just something that you need to have, I think. Or it's a job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's why I'm
you
saying
need the money. But it's like, what's my motivation?
Yeah,
as the
can you
actors
answer the
say.
question, what's in it for me? If you need a job and the person's going to pay you money and the check is going to clear, then that's a reason. But if they're not going to do that, I would run from that person.
Yeah, because that's sort of a using kind of person.
Okay.
You can spend that time writing something that's all yours.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's the bottom line of it.
Well, yeah. The hard thing was she's sitting there telling me, I know exactly how I want you to write this, and then I'm thinking, well, then why don't you write it?
Oh, because she doesn't have the time.
Yeah.
If she only had
she
the
wants
time.
to tell me how to write it. Yeah.
But she's just so busy.
Yeah. Okay.
I think this is a really common, actually professorial and actually just civilian thought. I would write that movie. I would write that play. I would write, I'm just so busy, but I've got this great idea.
Yeah.
There's a great idea to have, and if you could just do it and just put, the finishing touches on it quickly, I'll sort of have written it. I mean, this is just the ultimate, I have no idea what writing is person.
Okay, that was my instinct.
And it would be, just recently I was offered a rewrite on a feature, and most of the stuff that comes to me, with a lot of flow is TV. So there were reasons to do this, I knew the executive, and the woman producer who was on it was just this notorious micromanager, horrible person who I'd heard about this. So I get talked into having this, reading the script, which was kind of charming, and having this call with this woman. And the woman, the whole call was like this. She was like, "Oh, we're so excited that you might do this, and this is what we were thinking. We really haven't spent any time on it. Blah 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 blah." And I go, "Well, gee, I see the problem with that. Oh, well, you'll think of all that. You'll figure all that out." But I could tell it was all going to be about doing every crackpot idea she had, whether or not one thing made sense or related to each other. Hung up. I was all nice. "Oh, great. I'll see you next week." Call my agent. I'm like, "Get me out of it, man. I'm not a stenographer. I do not want to try and string together this nutty woman's ideas." And that's why I asked you if she was going to pay you. If she was going to pay you and you're a young writer, do it.
Then do
Otherwise,
it. Then do it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Odds are your first couple jobs are not going to be, completely soul-filling, I mean, odds are.
Yeah.
No, totally.
But making your rent is great.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks.
Now we've got a lot of them. I don't need a mic. I'm loud. Okay.
You need a mic.
Nope.
You might for the
Sorry.
You're loud, but you need a mic.
All right, thank you. I wanted to talk about the character of Simon because we're talking about writing male characters, and to me, I did not read the book, so I don't know what he was like in the book. He was just so damn perfect. He was like the perfect guy, and he was cute, and he was like adorable, and I couldn't understand why. And not that it wasn't believable, because I love this movie. This is the second and a half time I've seen it, and I cried like every.
Second and a half?
Well, I watched part of it on HBO. I saw it once, and then I came in partway on HBO, and then but I wanted to come see it again tonight because I totally love it. But he was just. Like, are there any men like that? Like, he was just perfect. I mean, but it didn't bother me, and then I thought, oh, he's unrealistic. But a friend of mine actually did say that, oh, he was too good to be true. And I just wondered about his character because he just seems so.
Yeah.
But he did have a flaw. I mean,
What?
well, I mean, he had. What would you say his flaw was?
I know a lot of people who would overlook Simon Stein for a good long time. I think he is not, I think Mark's adorable. I love him.
I think he's so cute.
Lovely and so talented. I've got a big old crush on
I
Mark
saw him at
Kirstein.
Marmalade, and he is really cute.
He's tall, and he's polite and nice and smart, and he went to Princeton, and, But, but I don't think, for a lot of people, when they close their eyes and imagine the man that's going to sweep them off their feet, I don't think that's the profile. He's responsible. He is
Short.
he's short. Right. I mean, he might have been maybe a little too handsome for the role, but he's such a good actor, and he makes that great stupid face the first time you see him. And he's not terribly bold, He pined for her for a couple of years before he did anything about it, and he greets her with I don't know, he wasn't her fantasy, He wasn't cool. He's not cool. He's not in the least bit cool. And he wasn't the stuff of her fantasy, He does turn out to be pretty fabulous.
So you really believed him, though.
I believed him completely. I always think hire the best actor and and you can work with the look. I love how he looks, but I think it's easy to, and I think Curtis worked hard to make him someone who could be overlooked in the beginning of the movie. They sort of blended him in a little bit.
Well, he's certainly not as cute and charming as he is, and he's not a traditional leading man.
No, he's not.
No, but he's got
not
so much
super.
charisma that even
he's-
kind of laying back, he has sex appeal. At
Yes,
least for me. I
yes.
think he's awfully cute.
And I'm just going to ask a little question. Do you think the movie is also partly about letting go of the
of the fantasy of your life and embracing what your real life is, partly because you were just saying he's not her fantasy, and I was just remembering what I felt watching the movie, and I felt almost like they both had these fantasies of how their life could go and what their lives should be, and that should word, and then they finally embrace what their lives.
Yeah, I guess there are a lot of dreams that die in the movie. The dream of the gym kind of guy and the dream of being famous on TV.
But also they
and that-
actually start to live out dreams that they didn't even know were their dreams.
Right, I mean, real
Right. What, right.
hopes rather than fantasies. Yeah, I wouldn't say that that was one of the more dominant things that I had at play, but it's nice that it happens.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, wait for the microphone.
Thank you. I just loved many of your movies, but I adored In Her Shoes, and I mentioned to you on the break, I saw it like twice in a row as soon as I saw it, and I think I've seen it 4 or 5 times since. And
God bless you.
I just thought it was glorious. I thought it was so amazingly well written, and I just started to read the book as I knew you were here. And I have 2 questions. But one, I just want to tell you, I thought the movie just grew and grew and grew so beautifully. Like, I mean, I just thought it kept getting better and better emotionally. I was like, wow, right to the very end, which was so stunning. I just optioned a book for the first time. I was wondering, and I was reading your books, and that was so fun to see the red underlining. I was wondering if you had anything to talk about the process of how you did it. I've heard people say they pick out what's most important on each page.
Oh,
I've heard other
God.
people, how did you approach the book process? And then the other quick question I wanted to ask is, as you were both all having that discussion real quick, what did you think like the theme to yourself was as you were writing the movie? But I was most interested in how you went about adapting the book.
I got this job adapting it, and I had never done an adaptation, and I went into Pete's Coffee, and Steve Clovis was there, who had done he did Wonder Boys, and he had done the Harry Potter stuff too. Right, he did Harry Potter, right?
Totally.
Yeah, and I was thinking I was confusing it with another, like Lord of the Rings or something, but so I had met him a couple times, and I said, oh, I just got this job adapting. I've never done it. You know what you're doing. And he said, just give them the book they bought. They want the book they bought. They don't want something else. They want what they bought. And
Somebody had a unpleasant.
I said, okay, give them a book. Give them a book they want. And then I walked away, and I thought, okay, I think maybe Steve had an experience in changing a book that didn't go so well, and maybe I'll just leave Steve's advice, impassioned advice, in the coffee shop and go back. And I had no system. I just went through and underlined things I thought would be useful. I underlined good lines that I thought, oh, yeah. And I went with different colors, I think, for different characters, or different themes. Like the mother theme had a color, I think, because I knew that was all going to have to not be dramatized. The Ella, that whole story is a different story. So just as I flipped through, that was really just for if I'm going back and looking for something, I can save myself some time if I know I'm looking for something red, rather than anything.
I love color
scientific.
coding. I like to take the pens out, the pretty pens.
No, and you
the-
feel like you're doing something, don't
Yeah,
you?
and then you can flip.
Oh,
through
yeah,
and
you got
go,
those colored pens are really
"Oh,
making
I know where the
progress."
red is. Oh, and sometimes with the colored 3x5 cards and then the different colored
And
pens.
colored Post-its?
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Like Stanley Kowalski, get those colored pens going.
Okay, wait. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
So that was, and then I just started laying it down. I knew I wanted it to open as the book opens with Maggie in the bathroom, because that's a good opening. Yeah. And then I knew I needed a Rose counterpoint, and having her, that was so much about Maggie's self-esteem and sexuality, and in relation to Rose as well. She doesn't refer to Rose directly, but you then cut to Rose and realize that's the sort of the stuff that she doesn't have. You see it with Rose pretty quickly. And the voiceover we used for Rose was actually written after the movie was assembled. I'm trying to remember what it was. initially. Oh, it was more about Jim himself and that idea of a fantasy. Like, I finally got it. I can't believe this happened. But it was less about, you know, this is who I am. I read romance novels. That stuff wasn't there. It was less of an introduction of herself and more of a, here I am right now in this situation. But Maggie was just sort of landing a little more concretely than Rose was, so we decided to redo that. Themes, you know, I just knew that I wanted that they both defined themselves in terms of each other, and I knew that in a funny way they were carrying each other's loads, you know, like Rose had Maggie's brains on her shoulders, and Maggie had all of Rose's sensuality and lovability on hers, you know, and it was only sort of in getting away from each other that they were able to pick up those things themselves. So I knew that it was about shedding a definition of yourself in relation to someone else, and finding that within yourself. I mean, it's just sort of like this mathematical thing. You know, a lot of it's like carpentry. You know, it's like this goes here, and then they go over here. You know, but that was sort of it. And then that Ella thing that comes through is a little different, but in a way she set something down as well. You know.
She sets down her burden.
Yeah.
Her secret.
Yeah, and the weird thing is she was so driven by guilt in the book. And guilt is really hard to dramatize. You can't. You just can't. There's, you know, it does nothing but stop someone from behaving. So I, rather than thinking, oh, she's not doing something because of guilt, I had to think what she is doing, what she's replacing that empty place with. What would her action be? And that was trickier because so much of that internal stuff, she had just, in the book, she was a woman who had just stopped herself from so many things, you know?
I was going to ask if you could also talk about how in the book she comes real soon, and then in
Right.
your movie I was fascinated. I was like, wow, she doesn't come till almost the point that you're like, huh, here comes a new big character.
Right.
Wow,
Pretty
and
late.
how did you choose that?
About as late as you can get away with it. Because you can't, you know, you could have cut in, but until you are clear, you would have said, why do I care about this woman in Florida?
Right, no, it came at the perfect
You know?
part. I just thought it was like,
There wasn't
wow.
any dramatic need to
The-
go to
the
Florida.
other thing that-
one of your characters goes there.
The other thing that I liked about it, and it's something that, you know, that I've, you know, run into when you're doing something where you're trying to tell two stories equally, to not make it literally symmetrical, because then it just gets dull. You're showing this, and then you're showing that, and
Right.
it's just, it's too neat.
Ping pong.
It's too ping pong. It, you know, and by introducing that character later, it kind of infused the movie with something that you didn't necessarily see coming, that had sort of been set up, but not
Right.
like with a big headlight on it.
Right. You had the letters. And also, she only, really sort of structurally, she becomes Maggie's person as Simon becomes Rose's. So to introduce her earlier would have sort of robbed Maggie of that sort of change in her. I didn't
Fascinating.
feel right.
No, I was just fascinated. I
More
just wanted to hear.
that than anything else. It
Interesting.
just- I think I may have tried putting her in earlier, but it just, I mean, when would you go to her, and why? Why would you go to her? You know, maybe when she sees the letters, but you wouldn't, because what's going on with the characters is so much more interesting.
Yeah.
So
There's someone back there.
Hi. It's loud, sorry. I was curious about the overwriting question because I'm just starting out and I find that I've written like 15 pages that end up being about nothing a lot. do you ever get the chance to like recycle them? Can you go like, oh, those 15 pages I wrote 3 years ago for that other screenplay, it'll be brilliant right here, or do I just have to let that go?
They're about nothing. They're no good.
It was like
A joke? You can recycle a joke.
Yeah.
Recycle
But
a
even
character.
then,
Even
even
that's
then,
hard.
it
That's hard.
honestly,
I can sometimes I'll throw one in without realizing, just because the same way you retell a joke in life, and you realize, oh,
Right,
did I use that? No, I cut it. It's still available.
thank God. But I put stuff back in, and then it goes and goes because there's something that comes out of the organic moment that's generally better. And I've been in a lot of comedy rewrite rooms, and there's the people that really hold on to stuff, or that it feels like a precious non-renewable resource. And if you really trust that you have an infinite amount of stuff that you can come up with, you won't care about that. To me, if I could just never have to look at it again, I really, even though maybe there was something wonderful in it, the other thing that will happen, I promise you, is you'll have written something in there in the middle of page 8, where later you'll be writing something and then you'll go, oh, that thing, I can use it here. There was some reason that you were writing it. So it's not literally nothing, or you needed to write those pages to get to the one idea. That's what she's talking about overwriting, is you were clearing the way for that other thing to come up.
Right.
You were occupying yourself while the other ideas were marinating, and something will come from that because you showed up. At least one hopes.
Yeah, and I'll often find on page 6 the scene. You're like, oh, okay, there. I just started on page 6, but it takes bouncing back and forth between people to.
Well, I don't know if you were here, but down in the library, there's the first scene in Romeo and Michelle's high school reunion. The first line of the movie starts on the 17th page of the scene that I wrote of them sitting around watching Pretty Woman. 17 pages. And I finally got to that page, but I was having a great time. I was watching Pretty Women with Romeo and Michelle and hanging out and
You were getting to know some
messing
stuff.
around and getting to know the characters, but it's down in the library where you can see it took that long to get to what became the first line. So
Yeah.
I definitely think our minds are powerful, and what both of the people on my either side are saying is so key, I think, and I need to hear it myself, which is that when you have a mentality of lack, you're going, oh my God, how am I going to save this? How am I going to make sure this gets used? It's a mentality of lack, and you're telling yourself that it might be that you can't get more ideas. It might be that you can't really keep going. It might be that you're not not going to be interesting tomorrow. But the truth is, it is abundant. There isn't a limited amount of interesting stuff coming out of you. That's just a thought you have.
and think about when you were little, and I don't know how many people's moms made pancakes, but you'd had to make a lot of pancakes and just throw them out, and then you kind of
It's like, it goes with your eggs analogy.
eggs and the eggs
like-
with the scrambled eggs and the pancakes. But you know how you had to get the
can tell it's like a
skillet to
woman
be the
panel.
right heat and all that. So don't.
Hungry.
I love how we're the woman panel who's like it's all about eggs and pancakes.
Nurturing.
We're feeding
and
people.
cooking for people.
Well, that's what we do. Yeah, it's like, I mean, guys are always going, like, using those sports
I
metaphors.
think I'm so glad that there's any guys left in this class.
I thought we'd driven them all away. But
Yeah.
apparently-
Yay for the guys who are still here. Yay.
More questions?
Yes.
I have a follow-up question about cutting. 3 weeks ago, we kind of talked about whether or not you reread your writing, and several you guys mentioned, and the guests
Dawn.
mentioned that
Right.
rereading is kind of not the system because you know what you wrote.
Oh, there's no system.
Well-
There's no system.
Oh, sometimes I totally reread what I've written.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean,
that's
I
my-
think Don
yeah.
Roos was saying,
Done.
Okay.
Yeah.
saying that he does not, he does eventually when he's all got a draft,
But he just keeps
but
pressing
he does
forward.
not reread what he wrote that yesterday in the morning, that the next day, he does not go back over and reread it. And then Audrey Wells came in and said the exact opposite, which
I
is,
do too.
that's how she starts her day.
Yeah, I start, and that sort of gets me into it. I
And I
start
have to
by
say I do
rereading
that
the day
as well.
before's work, and I make, changes on the hard copy, and then I sit down and I type in the changes, and then before you know, I'm moving beyond that. And
But I can understand if I can just channel Don Roos for a second, and this is not how I work, but I can understand why he would do it that way, because there's a level where you can be very much propelled forward, and where you could get obsessed with what you just wrote, and you're working it, and you don't want to move forward into the unknown, which to me is the key of all of my fears.
Right.
I'm fearful of the unknown. I'm fearful of the part of the story, which is usually most of it, that I don't understand yet and don't know how it's going to be. I'm just afraid of everything I don't know and can't control. So I am staying in this one little block of dialogue that I know exists. Now, I'm not saying that's wrong. There's no system. None of us are saying that. But I just know I've done that for days.
Well, my question to follow up about cutting, which is good to hear about you do reread, because that helps me, because I reread. But I'm wondering, is it best to cut when you're done, or do you cut as you reread and you are still creating?
honestly, I think what's best to do is what feels right to you. I have the way I work usually, and then sometimes I work completely differently, and it's probably not the most comforting answer, because the nice thing would be if somebody said, well, what you should do is read the day's work before, the day before's work, change it, at the end of the day, cut it, but it's that thing Winnie's saying, you just gotta dive in, see what you feel, check your gut, and I cut as I go along. I write and I cut, and I write and I cut, and write and cut, and eventually I've done it all to the end, and then I go back and do some more. But you can't tell Don Roos to do that. You can't tell anyone else to use. It's really just and I would not tell you I have a system either.
Yeah, I don't have a system.
I can look back and say, I guess in the past I've generally done it this way. But I don't go into it thinking, now's the time when I should X. It's just so much more gut than that.
It just varies. It's like sometimes it becomes so clear that you don't need something, you can't bear to look at it, so you might cut it then, and then other times you really don't know until the end. Like sometimes you feel like, I don't know how much I really need to set up, so I'm just going to leave all that set up. I would have such anxiety at one point about cutting as I was going, but then I couldn't stand, what I'd written, that I had this thing called save pages. And I had, a file folder, and it was called save pages, and it just felt, and then I would write save on it, and I would save it, and I never looked at it again, but or like all... rename a file. Like if the file's called play, I'll call it play 1. So I'm keeping all the stuff so I don't have to feel anxious that I've, obliterated it, but yet I don't have to go back to it either. And
You can always put it back.
you can always put it back. I rarely do, and then sometimes I'm so grateful that I still have it. Again, when you find that little place where it's like that weird irrational scene will now fit here. But really what I'm talking about is dealing with my own anxiety.
That's so funny. I hadn't thought about that before. I don't think I have ever pulled something back in that I've cut and made a special file for. I might need
So you
this.
do the special file too?
Yeah, I don't throw things
Yeah.
away entirely.
Yeah,
It's never to be found again.
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply that. If I implied that I did that, I actually don't. But I don't find I've ever used. I don't. Except I guess in Wicked, I have to admit, a lot of times in Wicked,
stuff up in.
sometimes people, there was pressure to cut stuff, and then later people went, oh wait, maybe we need that, and it would come back. But I wanted to just say one thing about cutting, which is that I feel like there's, like I was shared last week, that I have I have a script at home that's over 150 pages long. I guess it's like 153 or something like that, whatever. And that thing you were saying about the minute a page thing, I had been beginning to realize that, but I was in denial. But what I was going to say is that, I handed it in to the person who was going to direct it, and now he's no longer, but I handed it in to him at that length. First of all, we had an understanding that I could do that. But secondly, I just wasn't at a place, just flat out. I just knew that if left to my own devices, I might be cutting just the very things that we needed. I really felt a little mystified about what to cut. I felt like I'm not an idiot. I know it's too long, but I just wasn't ready. And I think that there is buried in your question, sort of maybe you say to yourself, am I really ready to start hacking away? And I just needed more time. Now I've got more time. It's 3 months later or whatever, 4 months later. I am so ready.
Is it clear to you what should go?
No, but I know but everything's up for grabs.
Right.
Everything's going to have to plead for its life.
You don't do it if you're not
Yeah.
ready. If it doesn't feel like, don't just cut because it's time to cut. First round of Erin Brockovich was 168 pages.
Again, I feel so much better.
Well,
I didn't show it to anyone.
and
I knew I was in trouble.
And also sometimes, like, I've worked with people specifically, I've worked with people multiple times who almost serve as an editor for me. I like to collaborate a lot with other writers, and the writers maybe will be a producer in a non-writing capacity, but where I know they think like a writer, or somebody who's got a good sense of story, because sometimes the stuff that I either don't like or I'm not comfortable with that I would cut would really be the thing that I should leave. And, you don't always have the best perspective on your work, but there's no hard and fast rule. It's one of the reasons why everybody is here so hungry to get some answer for something where there's no answer other than, that was kind of interesting. Maybe that'll be helpful for me today.
Good. Oh, wow.
Yes. Oh.
I loved Ever After, and I was just wondering, it was such a smart twist on the Cinderella story. I'm just wondering how that movie came to be.
I had worked on Pocahontas, and one of the folks at Disney who hired me on that went to another studio and then called me up after Pocahontas was done and said they wanted to do sort of a merchant ivory Cinderella. And did I have any ideas about that? And I thought about it, and I thought, well, I'm not really interested in just deconstructing the Cinderella story, but I'm sort of interested in reconstructing it. And what if I took out magic? What if I made human potential the magic? And so, well, why don't I set it with the time of Leonardo da Vinci? And that's sort of, if I take out the fairy godmother and take out magic and put in Leonardo da Vinci and human potential instead, then I thought, oh, that's fun. And so I did a few drafts of that, and it was in pretty good shape. And then Andy Tennant and Rick Parks came on, and they did a couple drafts too, and then Andy Tennant directed it. There you go.
It's a great idea. Great idea.
Let's go back over to this side.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I'm sorry. I was looking over there at you, and then we'll go over to this side.
I was just going to say one of the things that I really enjoy about your scripts is the narrative description, and your voice is so clear that it's your writing when I read the scripts. And after I started reading them, it really helped me kind of free up my voice. I felt so rigid when I wrote my descriptions, like she went here and she went there. And then I read your scripts and I kind of thought, well, why am I doing that? It's retarded. Like I need to be like, I just, it was really inspiring to me to read that. So I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, and also kind of the idea of the internal character's thoughts that sometimes I see appear in your descriptions that actually make the scene much more interesting.
Well, there are a couple things. One is I always figured if somebody's going to sit down and read the script, you want to make it easier for them. You don't, and I have more fun writing something that's descriptive than what it's not. You have to be a little careful, though, that you don't give information in the stage direction that would not be translated, she looks out the window wondering how she's going to climb that tree. how are you going to know that's what she's thinking? You know, you got to be careful not to overwrite them to the point of not actually having the information once it's on the screen. But you know, I always think there's a really big disconnect between what people are thinking and what they're saying. So I like to try to indicate that as much as possible. And a lot of it is for an actor, you know, without doing too much, making it clear when somebody says, yeah, what they mean is no, you know. So I really try a lot to make the fact that people don't usually say the thing that's in their mind, dramatize that as much as I can. You know?
We've talked about subtext before, and that's just called good writing.
Yeah. And it's, you know, Woody Allen's scene on the balcony, you know.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
He did it best.
I just wanted to make one quick comment, and this sort of goes back to Julia's question, but it came up last week with Audrey, and again with Susannah. It's happened for me and Winnie, which is this sort of idea where I did a script for somebody, and then they went somewhere else and they wanted to hire me. That doesn't happen when somebody hires you to write their shitty idea. It happens when you bring something of yourself so that that person gets there's something about Susannah that she's going to want to seek out again to do something else. And that can only happen when you show up with some passion, something to say, so that there's this thing turns out with some life to it. And
Yeah.
then the person remembers you when they go to their next place. So it's always a good idea to find that connection. That's
Yeah.
how you build a career.
I've tried not to take jobs that I wouldn't want to write if I weren't being paid for it, you know, which is a luxury. It's a total luxury. But to try and find in something the thing that makes it something you would want to write anyway, because then you're going to be present enough to do a good job. Money alone, no matter how badly you need it, is not going to make you a good writer, I don't think, or me. I mean, I've been broke, and writing just for money isn't the same as writing for money because you really want to tell a story.
Yeah, because also you want your work. I mean, when I think about my own career and everyone I know, what happened somehow, I mean, through admittedly through a series of bizarre occurrences that could just be called good fortune, but what happened is that something about my work started attracting people to it. And how are you going to be attractive in that sense? I mean, it's going to be because there's something in there that is coming from your authentic self.
Right. And simultaneously, there will be people who have absolutely no interest in working with you. There's an entire studio
totally.
that has avoided me, you know, and that's fine. They're not in the same
stupid.
business. No, they do a different thing, you know.
Right.
And
You're
that's
not for them.
fine. I am not for them.
Right.
But you know who I am, you know.
Right.
And I'm
I think
for
we
a
all
certain
fall
group of people. It's
into
not
that-
a huge crowd, but it's big enough.
We all fall into that category pretty neatly. I mean, the three of us, and I think that's important to say. That's a really good point. That you don't have to end up being for everyone to have a really wonderful career. You just have to be for who you're for.
Right.
And it breeds longevity. I mean, I think it's really the only way to be able to keep going with it is to have some sort of voice. Let's get a couple
In the
more
back,
questions
in the back, like this girl.
Hi, I'm a really big fan of yours. I would love to talk about, for you to talk about Erin Brockovich, because that for me was like a seminal movie. It just was such a strong female character with so much heart, with a really great, edgy story, and there's so few movies like that. What I wanted to know is when you were pitched the movie, how did it all happen? Was meeting Erin Brockovich what sold you on doing that? Because you talked a lot about how in her shoes, you know, you had to mull it over, but it
Right.
came
No,
to
this
you.
one I knew right away.
And
go
just
ahead.
one more question, yeah. With Erin Brockovich, because it could so easily have been like a Lifetime movie, one-liner, you know? So how did you go, this is not just a strong woman's story, this is so much more?
I don't know, a lot of people said, ooh, that was a tricky one. It really could have been a TV movie, huh? And I still don't understand that. I mean, I because it was just like one of those things. I went into this, I had just finished working on Ever After, and the language of Ever After was restrained. And I just knew I wanted to write someone who was not restrained. And I just had this, I was talking to somebody at Jersey, and I said, I just have this urge to write a really kick-ass broad, and I don't know what the story for that is yet. And she said, oh, well, we have this, this story based on a woman. She gave me the kind of outline, and I said, that's what I want to do. And she said, well, we're out to Cali Corey now, and this was shortly after Thelma and Louise, and I thought,
Oh, well.
well. So, 2 weeks later, I called her, and I said, hi, have you heard from Cali Corey? And she said, yeah, Callie's not going to do it. We're out to Paul Attanasio, though. And it just sort of went down this very fancy list. But every couple weeks, I'd called her up and said, I cannot get it out of my head. Still really interested. And they went through a couple of other folks. And then I think my polite persistence, which is a polite persistence, are both really good to have. But they need to go together. And I just sort of wore down, and she said, well, have a crack at it. And I don't know how I got all the information. I guess I met with the other, no, it was it was a nothing project there initially. It was I think people thought it was a lifetime thing, and so I didn't really have to go through much. I just had to meet Erin, and Erin and I got along great. She's fantastic and had a really good time together, and she sort of got that I wasn't going to violate her. And so she said it was good. And then I just moved ahead with it and did the script. And then they got more excited about it once it was.
Did you have a sense it was going to be what it was going to be, though? Because, it was huge.
I think everything I write is going to be, you never think something's going to fail, right?
No, I always do, actually.
And then the thing is, if you write that part, and the script, once I was a total basket case when I turned that one in, because that one I had really, really screwed up, I was sure of. And so, they called on Monday after the weekend, very happy with the work. So I felt better, and they said, and we're going to send it to Julia Roberts. And so then all of a sudden, the movie's just in a different league. And she tends not to make movies that aren't big. So, that sort of put it in another dimension. But at that point, you weren't writing a female lead for anyone but her, really, because that was, 2000. And there are other folks in that game, but they weren't on that. She was the go-to, absolutely head and shoulder. It wasn't a question. If you have a female lead, you're going to her, no matter what it is, really, because she was versatile. And so, there was, I had a description of her. Erin's got a really big chest. She's got a rack on her, and I made reference to it in her description because she dresses it, she presents it to the world, and she does, and it's part of who she is to, and so I made reference to it, and they said, Julia does not have a big chest like that, and we don't want her to see something on the first page that makes her say that's not me, so let's just take out the size, keep everything else, but just don't say they're big. And so you're always aware that I wasn't writing for her, but as soon as I turned it in, they were reading it thinking, and when we give this to Julia, what is she not gonna
Right. That reminds me of, I just read this interview of you before I came here, and you had this great line when somebody was asking you about Pocahontas, and you said, my only quibble is I wouldn't have made the Pocahontas' breast so big. I wouldn't have drawn him so big. It just sort of made me, that was just a great classic
But you
line.
know what, the one thing I did on that movie was that she was drawn by the time I got the job, and and I thought, all right, so she has a very fit body. So let's see her using her body for herself before we see somebody else looking at it. you know? So that's why she was climbing and diving, and she's up on that cliff and she does that huge dive, and I thought, let's see, and she runs, and I thought it should be hers first, because looking at it, you know, and within our culture, it's just, it looks like something else. So let's let her own it.
So
before
you
anyone
didn't
else does.
objectify her. You wanted not to objectify
Yeah,
her.
yeah.
Right.
This
we go.
right in front of you, yeah. And
My question is probably to all three of you. You started out as far as writing features, and then you segged to Party of Five, and then you went back to features. How has one medium informed the other? For the three of you, for Susannah. Anybody who wants to answer.
I really liked working in TV. You're writing a lot. It's getting made it made quickly. I had a great group of peers on that show, and the writers on that show were fantastic and really good people, all still very good friends, you know, and how often does that happen, you know? But I felt like I was developing some of my muscles really strongly, and I felt that others were atrophying. Just the sort of bigger story, I mean, the stuff that still hangs me up. And that might have just been that show, that it was you know, there weren't many writers, so we had to write a lot, so we couldn't stop and say, let's try to do this one completely differently, because we didn't have that kind of time. There were, you know, you were writing every 5th episode, so you were inevitably shooting one, writing another, and cutting another, you know, and so we didn't have the room to try a lot of different ways of skinning that cat on that show. And then just personally, I'll go see a really bad movie and have a great time. But when I'm home, knowing there's a really good TV show on, I'll still do other things. It's just not as big a part of my life. So when I would be working those really long hours, I didn't think, and it's for something I love so much, you know? So just that's purely personal. And then there's also just the life thing of, like, you go back to work in June and your kids get off school in June, and so that, I thought, I didn't have a family at the time, but I got married when I was on the show, and I thought, oh, that's going to be kind of tricky if I have a choice. I bet the vacations will be easier if I'm working features, you know? So those were my,
All right. Now, as
a lot of them were more lifestyle than creative.
Now, as a writer, when you were transitioning from the 1 hour to the feature, I mean, you had already done a feature.
Yeah, but
What do
Disney,
you
that
bring
Disney-
along with that as far as writing the feature after that? Because I've been writing television for a long time. I want to write a feature. For some reason, it freaks me out and scares me to death, even though
Because it's scary.
yeah.
You're absolutely
Exactly.
right.
You know, so when you went back to that after, you know, doing television, which is a fast medium, I mean, you don't have time to think like you do as a, you know, a feature writer. What muscle did you have to bring back to that to, like, transition?
No, just, you know, maybe I was wrong to think that it was a muscle that could be built. You know, I think for me, and I didn't create that show too, so that makes it a different thing. If you're going in and you're for hire, and I really love the characters and I really love the show, but for some reason I found features more challenging, and then ridiculously chose that.
But you have
but
more.
you
You
guys
have more
can
pride.
talk
You have
about
more
it, too.
pride of authorship because
Yeah.
you know you have, as you know, if you're working in television, you have a certain job, which is to do the best job you can within the parameters of the voice of the show. And when you go to do a movie, you're creating a world. You know, one of the things that I like about series television is you have to set up that week's story, but you don't have to set up the characters every week. You know, you have the luxury of being able to hit the ground running in terms of who these people are. So that's one of the advantages. But, you know, it's the $64,000 question. You've got to think. You're thinking about a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. You know, it's, in a way, it's the difference between if you're, you know, going to lunch and you're gossiping with people about people everyone at the table knows, versus you're going to lunch and you're telling that, like, you can't believe this person that I met, and you're starting from scratch. You're telling them,
And it's
go join Julia's group.
It's a tough it's a tough roll of the dice getting your own show too. I mean, as you guys know, you can write a great
It's hard.
show. You can write a great pilot, and then there isn't a slot for it. You know, it's I think it's trickier to get. You know, there are really good pilots that never got made because it just didn't fit the schedule.
Yeah, and unlike with movies, they don't have any shelf life. You know, people don't come back to them and go, "Wow, she wrote that great pilot 10 years ago. We should dust that off and look at that again."
Right.
I mean,
They're
have
dead.
as I've said, I
Infrequently
have
happens.
you know pilots I've written that I just think are definitely really like the best I can do, and as a pilot, and they nothing, crickets, you know.
But you know, if you do end up like Winnie has with a show that is on the air and actually, I mean,
Well,
I'm assuming
that's
you were
real
pleased with
fulfilling.
that. That's
Oh,
very
yeah,
fulfilling,
that's
but
as fulfilling as anything could be.
I think that's more like lightning striking than
Oh, totally.
getting a
That's like winning
feature
the
made.
lottery.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's more of a gamble.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question because I don't want to.
My goodness.
Huh?
Yeah,
No,
it
I just
got-
realized
it
what
got
time it is.
late.
Okay.
It
Yeah,
got late.
it got late. I mean, I feel like we could do 6 nights with her if we could get her to show up. No, not that we would.
No
but
pressure.
I'm saying, I meant to
No,
say.
I took it as a compliment. We're good.
Okay, good. I just meant to say we're just
So
getting
we
going.
have one more.
Yes, Colleen.
I was just wondering if you can talk a little bit about compromise. And, you know, obviously a movie like Erin Brockovich, you're working with a huge director and a huge star, and you want to honor what they want, but you still want the script to be what you want. Or maybe the movie that you directed, casting battle. You know, when do you roll over? When do you take the note? What battles do you fight?
That one you compromise on the experience when the actress wants a different writer on set. So that's the compromise. That's a big one. Other ones when, yeah, that's what happened. Oh, I thought everyone knew that.
No, I don't think so.
Really? Yeah. Once she came on board, I did it. I think I did another draft.
I didn't know that, sorry.
But anyway, yeah, there's another. She wanted somebody else to be on set and do any changes on set, and somebody she knew, and that will happen. Oh, honey. Welcome to the world. That's often. And that was very painful because I really thought I had done my best work on that, and I thought, if you got notes, give them to me. At least let me try once.
Well, yeah, that's
but
frustrating.
that wasn't the deal, and it's not the deal, because as soon as the more important entity is on the project, that's the more important entity, and your job is done. And so start another one. You know, really. So that was that compromise, but that one was forced on me, and you know, some compromises end up being. I mean, it's funny because I just directed this movie, so it's like thinking of compromises a little differently because I made
can we
them
hear about
myself.
that a little bit?
And that's just all. Compromise automatically sounds like you're getting less, doesn't it?
Well, to me, yes
it's
and
really
no.
just
I
you're
mean, it's
getting
sort of
different.
it's sort of also the nature of a life in which you're working always with other artists all the time, and usually a big crowd of them.
Yeah.
So-
And good ones.
Yeah. So
And-
how are you going to not? and in any group of people, there must be compromise.
Right.
In any relationship. And you're not doing this alone except for the time when you are, but even then you're not, because you're doing it with the plan, with the hope that all these other people will want to be involved. So how can compromise not come into play? I
And they'll
think.
add to it. I mean, compromise is never a word that works for me. It's collaboration, really. I mean, there are compromises when you just don't have enough money, you know, and so you think, well, we need fewer scenes then, and I
Or
gotta
I
put
think-
these two together in one location. Those are compromises. There's some things that.
Yeah, part of it is just
better,
like kind of the problem solving of, you know, a finite amount of time and budget and, you know,
And
but to
different
me,
people.
I put my foot down. I try not, if something comes at me and I'm not sure, I think I said this to you guys, but my stall tactic is like, that's really interesting. Let me think. Can I think about that? I really want them to feel like I listen to it. And sometimes I really don't know if I like the idea. But if it unravels something or just feels really wrong, then I know that I need to gently find a way to go, you know what? I love what you were saying, and it gave me another idea. What if I try this to try and be positive about it if you can, and also to look for things that you can compromise on that aren't going to kind of pull that thread that's going to unravel the sweater, so that you can seem reasonable. So when you do need to dig your heels in, you kind of have earned the right. You know, you're not just somebody's going no, 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 but you know, they've seen that you have this willingness to make some changes.
I just can think of so many instances where where a director has come to me and said something, and my instinct was, oh, that's terrible, or I can't, or no. And I mean, I'm not saying I said all those things, because I do try now not to say all those things, but but then I would sleep on it, and at some point the next morning, showering or making pancakes or whatever, doing the physical thing that frees your subconscious to think, it would come to me how I could do it and how it really actually did work. And I would be so grateful that I was no longer in my 20s and I hadn't said, I can't do that, or bursted into tears, or all the things
really
I used to do.
Or you know what else? What I do sometimes, if I hear somebody saying, I really want you to do this, and it doesn't feel right, I will often say, well, can you tell me what you were like, what did you read and what did you think before you came up with the change? You know, and often it'll be like, well, it was just slow, you know, like, oh, slow I can deal with. Boring I can deal with. I hated her, and not in a good way, I can deal with. But so often I try to get the person to tell me what the problem is rather than the solution. Because if the solution is wrong, there's often a problem that's worth paying attention to anyway. And then just come about it another way. And
I
thank them
love
for
that,
the
and
help.
also just get super interested. And we're strictly talking writing here. You know, if it's compromising but other areas, you know, whatever. You know, you think of what's the most important to me and what can I compromise on, basically. But get super interested in, you know, what is driving that comment? What's behind it? Like Susannah just said, is it slow? Is it, you know, if you can get that person to articulate what it is, maybe you'll get something good out of it. But at the very least, you'll get the goodwill of that person, because you'll be engaging with them. And maybe you'll get into kind of an interesting, you know, discussion that'll lead you to something.
Thank you.
Well, this has been Thank you so much, Susannah.